I'd always been working out. I knew my way around the gym, but when it came to knowing what to do, I kind of made up on the spot or just guessed or took whatever was open in the gym. And so I felt like something had to be able to tell me what to do. And that was kind of the spawn of the idea. There's an infinite number of ways in which people work out. There's so many different ways. There's so many nuances. There's so many differences in how they work out. And what's great is now we have these foundational models in LLMs. They came in right at the perfect time. Someone was telling me how they had joined a gym, they paid for a gym, they stayed in their car, and they're crying because they're too afraid to go to the gym. And so while they were in the car, they downloaded Fitbod. Fitbod told them what to do, gave them the confidence, were able to go to the gym, and that's really how they started the fitness journey.
Welcome to Subversive, a podcast dedicated to sharing stories from the best consumer subscription apps in the world. We'll bring you lessons for how to grow your consumer subscription business, including insights and inflection points that led to exponential growth from leaders at category-defining companies and innovative startups. Let's get into the show. My guest today is Allen Chen, the co-founder and CEO of Fitbod, a strength training app that first launched in 2015 and has since grown to more than 100 million workouts and 38 million in ARR. In this episode, I talked to Allen about why he and his co-founder spent many years focused on core product and subscriber retention for raising outside capital to accelerate growth, about the specific growth frameworks, strategies, and tactics that have fueled Fitbod's success, and about how Allen expects AI to reshape the fitness category over the next few years. All right, welcome, Allen, to the Subversive podcast. I'm really excited to talk about your app, Fitbod, today. It's one I've been using for many years now, along with Ladder in the strength training space. But before we get into the Fitbod story, let's just hear a little bit more about you and how you started your career and what ultimately inspired you to start this company.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great. I'm a big fan of the content, Phil, so we're really happy to be here. And yeah, my background, I studied computer science as an undergrad. I was down at UCLA. And after I graduated, I went out to New York and worked in finance. I did high frequency trading and I wrote portfolio trading algorithms there, which is really good, really interesting. I graduated in 2008. So that was, an interesting time to be in finance, I would say. And was able to start my career and build my career out in quantitative trading. Um, and on the flip side of everything that came together for Fitbod, I also had been working out my whole life. I played sports all through grade school, high school. I played rugby in college, and I did CrossFit after I stopped playing rugby for a little bit. And so the fitness and the training realm was there. The algorithmic and automated programming was there as well. And so it was actually a nice fit in terms of how that all came together.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say I also graduated college in 2008, and I didn't go into finance. I actually turned down an offer at JP Morgan and went to Bain to do consulting instead. But I remember those days, and it was brutal trying to break into finance during the Great Recession. So cool that you started in high frequency trading. We just had Nick Kaler on the podcast about a month ago and talked a little bit about how there's this sort of crossover between finance and performance marketing, but it's a whole different ballgame to be founding your own tech company. And so what was it that inspired you to pivot what sounded like a very successful early career in finance and go all in on founding Fitbod in 2015 with your co-founder, Jesse? And what did those early days look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're totally right. I was building my career in finance. I was actually going to grad school at the time for mathematics of finance to continue to further my career in finance. I had taken a break. I was going in between jobs. I was going to go to a hedge fund later that year, and in between jobs, I put together this logic that I was like, hey, like this is something that I would be interested in the gym. Well, like I said earlier, I'd always been working out. I knew my way around the gym, but when it came to knowing what to do, I kind of either made up on the spot or just guessed or took whatever was open in the gym. And so I felt like something had to be able to tell me what to do. I should be able to program my phone to tell me, hey, like, these muscle groups you worked out yesterday, they're sore. These other muscle groups are fresh. Here's a set of things that you should be able to do when you go to the gym. And that was kind of the spawn of the idea. Um, Got together with Jesse. So Jesse and I went to UCLA together. We met freshman year, second year we were roommates, and he's one of my best friends coming out of college. So we got together. I showed him a very ugly prototype in terms of what I was thinking, and Jesse being a brilliant product and design mind, just took it and ran with it, designed it, made it, you know, really, really well designed,
Hmm.
really strong UX, and was able to put together something that was, pretty awesome. Coming back to me, where I've been computer science, I was able to write the program. The combination of us, of a designer and a developer, I think was all we needed to put an app in the app store. So we got together, worked on it. It was a fun project. It was something that we wanted for ourselves, put it in the app store. And the great thing about building for yourselves is we got to product market fit pretty quickly,
Uh-huh.
right? So it was exactly what I wanted, exactly what we wanted. And the great thing is, it turns out that it was, a ton of other people wanted the same thing. And so we were able to really, put in the app store and get some traction pretty quickly, and build off of that. So a lot of fun to be part of that early days, and really it was, solving for a problem that we want to solve for ourselves.
Well, so much of what you just said there, I feel like is part and parcel of Y Combinator's recruiting strategy when they look at promising teams to add to their incubator. It's like, number one, have you worked with your co-founder or your co-founding team before? Because what kills most early stage startups is founder issues. And number two, are you building a product that solves your own need? Because that's such an unfair advantage when you know exactly what the gap is in the market that you are solving for and why it's something you personally want to improve your own life. It kind of gives you a de facto product roadmap you can work against. And so I guess I'll build on that. What was the early product roadmap for you guys? You launched in 2015. It sounds like you got some initial traction pretty quickly, but then you and Jesse famously spent years continuing to iterate on the core product experience, improve subscriber retention curves before you really took on outside capital and hit the gas on growth. Why did you take that approach, and what were some of the benefits to that sort of slow and steady first couple innings?
Yeah, absolutely. In the early days, we were just building something we wanted, and like I said, we put it in the app store. It got traction right away, which is pretty awesome to see. And then anyways, we got lucky, and we ranked pretty highly for people searching for strength training in the app store. So that was all great to see. Now, you know, in the early days, Jesse had been, at a different job. He was at another, tech company in San Francisco. I was still in school and planning to go back to my job. And so we didn't set out to say, hey, like, let's make a venture scale business. We just, we were just building. And in many ways, we didn't know what the venture landscape looked like. And so we built this, we put it in the app store, and it just made sense to us that the next step would be to say, hey, like, can we make it? Can we make a little bit of money off of this, right? So initially, the product was free, completely free. We put it out there; it was great. And the awesome thing about this was, there was a certain delight factor in 2015 where people would download it, check it out, and it would be able to calculate exactly what they needed. And so it was almost like, imagine opening Google Maps for the first time. You put it point A to point B, and you have exactly what you need to get there. And nothing like this had existed before. So this is a pretty awesome delight factor. We were free at the beginning, got a lot of users, got a lot of really good feedback, and we were able to continue to iterate based on what users were telling us. At some point, we said, hey, you know, should we put a subscription on this? And those are the early days of Apple subscriptions. And so we're like, hey, can we make some money off of this, right? And would this be able to generate any sort of money? And as that started to grow and scale, then it was like, okay, like, can we, can this potentially be my job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can I actually, make enough money such that this could be my job? And so we went to the App Store in late 2015. We worked on it all the way through 2016. Mid 2016, we started to monetize, and we were freemium, so we only monetized the very top users who wanted to pay for the ancillary features. And by the end of 2016, we had decided that, hey, this is something that we were going to go all in on, and try to do. At that point, we had joined an incubator. It was called Launch Accelerator, and it was run by Jason Calacanis. And so we went to the incubator. That came with a little bit of money, in terms of it was a 25K check that the incubator came with. And so we were able to put that into marketing. We did some ads, and then we also hired our first outside team members. And having a strong funnel that we had with strong retention, good word of mouth referrals, and people converting to subscribers. Um, it was almost like filling a fire right away. And so that was, just awesome to see, a lot of fun to be part of, and we were able to grow and scale to the end of 2017, which is when we closed our pre-seed round is what we closed at the end of 2017.
Got it. Yeah. So a lot of different directions we could go here, but one I want to ask about is in those early days, as you start to get your first 1,000 users, it can be difficult to know who to listen to and who not to. So how did you focus your early user research efforts on the most valuable users who are the right ones to be taking feedback from in order to get the product market fit flywheel going? Did you just focus on the subscribers, or were there other metrics you looked at to say, like, okay, these are the users we want to be talking to?
I didn't really have a huge system around this. Obviously, we were two people, so I was answering every email,
Hmm.
and so I had a very good idea of the sentiment and the feedback that people were giving us. And the great thing about that sentiment at the time was a lot of it went towards, hey, I love your product. Fitbod is so great. I wish it could also do, this, and that. And so that feedback to me was a very strong signal of saying, hey, like there's a ton of opportunity here, you know, based on what we had created at the outset, there's much more to work on. And to try to organize that into thoughts, I don't know. I don't really have a system in terms of how I organize the feedback. I will say that, I was using the product, uh, you know, almost every single day. And so, feedback would turn into, hey, let's, write this into the code and let's go ahead and take this to the gym to see how it works. So I think maybe, for better or worse, the way I organize the feedback is how it would apply to the way Jesse and I would actually utilize it
Uh-huh.
in the gym, right? So it's almost like, it was almost like first person feedback and dog fooding into really a product that we wanted to use ourselves.
Well, it goes back to why building for your own need is such an unfair advantage, because if you're iterating in a vacuum, then it's sort of you're doing your best to filter all this feedback from all these users and figure out what your North Star product vision and strategy is going to look like. But if you're building for yourself, then you can sort of listen to 100 ideas and be like, well, these 10 are great and these other 90, like maybe it's for someone else, but it's not what we want to build into our product. So it's one of many reasons why that's such an unfair advantage. At what point did you realize that, okay, this is working well enough that it does make sense for us to go beyond the launch incubator and go raise our first round of outside capital and maybe start to spend a little bit more money on paid advertising and other acquisition channels?
Yeah, so we went through Launch Accelerator, and that was actually the point where we were like, hey, like there's an opportunity ahead of us. Let's go ahead and take this down the venture path. So we raised money. Jason, was and is still our biggest investor. And we went down the path to say, hey, like let's raise what the pre-seed round is. Let's raise subsequent rounds. With us, we have always been cash flow positive for the entire life of the company, going back to when we were in the accelerator. And so the question is, okay, like, what were we going to take this money? What were we going to use it on? How are we going to scale it with this money? The paid ads flywheel worked incredibly well. We had a really strong payback. We were able to take the revenue we made from paid ads and put it back into the business, which was incredibly great. And so what happened was we went to raise these rounds, and they ended up being relatively small rounds. We didn't raise
Mm-hmm.
a whole lot, and at the same time, we didn't dilute ourselves a whole lot through these rounds. We did actually try to raise the rounds, and I think that there was just this dynamic of, okay, like what is it? What like where is this outcome going to get to? And and I guess what I'll say is that we raised a little bit of money. We didn't need a whole lot of money because we're building and growing off of our revenues. That if we look back at where we are today, we did not raise those large rounds. We have $38 million, nearly $40 million in ARR today. We've been around for 10 years. We've had our ups and downs as a company, but we've made over $150 million in the life of the company. And I know
Mm.
that's a cumulative number, so it's almost like a vanity metric. But the reality is we've been able to invest all of that money back into the business. So we've invested, all of that 150 million after Apple fees, of course, back into the team, back into the platform, back into acquisition. And so, we tried to raise the venture rounds, but really what we ended up at was a really good position where we still control the company. We're growing at 40% year over year, which is, at the pace that we should be compared to these companies, and we're in a really good position. So I do think that it was good to have gone down that path. I think definitely learned a lot through it all. But I think that we basically landed in a place that is exactly where we need to be.
Yeah, well, and I think this is increasingly going to be the de facto playbook for consumer subscription app founders. I think we've just come out of a decade where your approach was a little bit more contrarian because we were living in the ZIRP period, the zero interest rate period, where venture capital was so cheap and easy to come by. And founders were just taking outside capital wherever they could and pumping it into Facebook and Instagram and Google and other paid acquisition channels. And sometimes that works, but oftentimes as you scale and you get further from your ideal customer profile, the unit economics stop working. The LTV goes down, the CAC goes up, growth grinds to a halt, and everybody's underwater, which is a terrible position to be in. So, if you can make it work, this sort of bootstrapped or minimalist outside capital approach could be really powerful. But it sounds like, despite that, you've been able to get to some really impressive numbers, close to 40 million in ARR. I think you're approaching 50 employees. Let's talk about some of the specific growth strategies and tactics that helped to drive that success. And I'd love to start sort of theoretical, and then we'll get increasingly practical about it. On other podcasts, I've heard you talk about some of the frameworks that you and Jesse look to for inspiration. So there's Nir Eyal's book, Hooked, which was one of the first books I read on growth many years ago when I was starting my career in tech. You've also mentioned Eli Lerner's offense versus defense framework. How have those and other frameworks informed your growth strategy at a high level? And then we can get down into the specific strategies and tactics you've used.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to double back on what we just talked about, and you talk about how, like, in the prior days, this was a contrarian view, but I do think that at least in the consumer subscription realm, that makes a ton of sense, right? It doesn't cost a lot of money for a designer and developer to get, especially with AI tools now, to get started, build a product, and put it out there, and also with acquisition, like acquisition should be accretive, it should be ROI positive. So, if a lot of people are asking, hey, how do I raise a lot of money to spend a lot of money on paid ads, a funnel or an upside down direction that never quite made sense to me. And I think specifically for consumer subscription, it isn't absolutely necessary. Obviously, there's other areas of SaaS and Silicon Valley where venture funding is an important piece of it. But I think consumer subscription is very easy to get started, put it out there, and start to just generate that flywheel that continues to scale and scale.
For what it's worth, I completely agree with you. I just think there's this misconception because of the fact that the outliers in consumer subscription from the last decade oftentimes didn't take that approach. So I've cited, the Duolingos, the Stravas, the Tenders of the world. It was like raise a lot of VC, focus on building the user base as large as possible, prolong monetization for years in some cases. I mean, Duolingo founded, I think, in 2011, didn't start monetizing until 2017 with the launch of Duolingo Plus. And that model can work, but for every Duolingo, there's 1,000 failure stories. And even for Duolingo, I think it worked because we were in a different era where outside capital was easier to raise and the app stores weren't as crowded. And so you could just get organic growth much more easily. That's not necessarily the case anymore. And so let's talk specifically and tactically around, how these frameworks have inspired your growth strategy, but then let's get into how you've grown organically, how you've driven viral word of mouth, and then on the paid side, how you've been able to maintain paid marketing efficiency as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the book Hooked, this is a great book, and the book Hooked is all about building habit forming products. And as we were building Fitbod, we had the book Hooked. We had the two books. We actually had two books, Hooked and The Power of Habit. And the book Hooked is all about identifying the trigger. In our case, getting someone to go do their workout, identifying the action, giving them a great experience while they're working out, having them enjoy the actual workout, the reward. People are feeling good about their workout after their workout. Obviously, we give them some glitter and trophies after they work out, and then all of that information goes into the investment that goes into that next trigger. So we knew all about this as we were building the product, and in terms of building a habit, this is something that is ingrained in us, ourselves, right? And the great thing was, a few years later, Nir came to us, and Nir was like, "Hey, like this is a great way to actually implement this model." And we're like, "Yes, we followed this." And so we came together. Nir's a great guy, and subsequently, he actually put us in the book as one of the chapters in the book. So I think all goes hand in hand in terms of, if you build a great product that allows people to build strong, positive habits, that is very compelling, and that keeps people engaged and retained. And that's really a good foundation for what's helped us grow to where we are.
Like you, I've read the book multiple times. I think it's one of the best out there when it comes to habit formation. And to me, one of the most interesting steps is converting the extrinsic trigger into the intrinsic trigger. And so in the book, Nir talks about how you got to start by manufacturing these reminders for users to, in your case, go to the gym until they've done it enough times that it becomes an intrinsic trigger. And every time they want to go work out, they associate that with Fitbod. So what were some of the ways that you manufactured those early habit loops to get users to the habit moment where they were just doing it on their own?
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty natural loop in the realm of working out because the whole thing about working out is you engage your muscles and you work with your muscles and then they take time to recover. And by the time the muscles recover, then it's time to engage the muscles again. And so a big part of the early product was really identifying the different muscle groups and being able to keep track of, okay, here's how long it's been since you engaged that muscle group. Here's your pattern of how long it takes for your muscles to recover. And oh, but when they're recovered, let's go work out again. And so people get into this, and the great thing is people were opening the app, and I do this sometimes with different apps. I'm sure you do it, where you open an app to check, to check stuff out. You're not even working out, but you check it out. You're saying, hey, when is the next time I'm going to do this? And so it's almost like the investment, which is your body recovery state, going into that excitement, which is the trigger to go do your next workout. And so we're able to actually ingrain that into the flow of our product.
Got it. Okay, cool. So what I'm hearing you say, and this makes sense, in some categories, habit formation is much more difficult because it's more of an episodic use case, or there aren't sort of the natural reminders that, hey, it's time to go to the gym. In your case, it's like you go do a strength training workout, your muscles are sore for a few days. Once they start to recover, then it's time to go back. But you were able to build on that by having, whether it's push notifications, email campaigns, or even just like in-app features that sort of let the user know these are your different muscle groups. These ones are ready to go. You can go to the gym today and do your upper body workout, but your lower body is still recovering because you did that, the heavy thigh day earlier in the week, and so give it more time before you do more squats. Is that kind of how you were thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And not discounting the fact that this is work, right? It is hard work to go to the gym and work out, but the actual flow of engaging your muscle groups, letting them recover, and then going back to the gym, that is a pretty natural flow to strength training.
That makes sense. Okay, so then moving beyond Hooked, what are some of the other frameworks that you guys have thought about? You mentioned Eli's offense versus defense framework. Would love to talk about that one, and then any others that have been inspiring for you all as you've developed your growth strategy over the years.
Yeah. So absolutely, the offense versus defense framework is something that we talk about internally all the time. And it's Eli Lerner put this together, and essentially it's that defense is the category of items that are incredibly important that we have to do at a sufficient level in order to maintain our business. Um, Now compare that against offense, which is also incredibly important, but these are the ones with upside. These are the ones where if we invest further into, if we invest more into, that will help us drive further growth and reach. And identifying the two different buckets is critically important to understand, hey, like this is where we must invest a set of resources versus this is where we actually see the upside to continue to dive deeper and deeper into it. So that's a great framework that we look at, we talk about. And obviously when we have projects, we put up against that to see, where they fit there. In terms of other frameworks, I'm sure there's a lot out there. The product market fit framework is definitely one of them. And yeah, the different, I wouldn't necessarily say frameworks, but different knowledge and teachings and content around growth and
Mhm.
growth loops, I think are pretty big. And I'm sure, you've talked about some of these as well. So there are definitely a lot of different areas where we're, following some of the experts in the space and bringing in the best practices in order to, run the business and grow.
Well, and one I'll throw in there, you mentioned growth loops. And for me, Reforge and all of the content that Brian Balfour and the team at Reforge have put out over the last decade or so has been really influential on my career as a growth leader. I've got my framework, the subscription value loop, which is very influenced by some of the more general lessons around compounding growth loops that aren't necessarily specific to consumer subscription, but obviously influence how I would think about growing a consumer subscription business. But to me, the real breakthrough with loops versus funnels is that loops compound over time. And the output of any cycle of the loop becomes the input into the next cycle. And so maybe we could start to get more tactical and talk about some of the specific growth loops that have driven your success at Fitbod through that lens. And let's start on the organic side. So one of the benefits of spending so much time in the early days focusing on building a delightful core product experience is that you've talked about how every subscriber or even every non-subscriber who comes into Fitbod becomes a potential vector for word of mouth to drive free acquisition for your product. How did that look early on? And then To what extent did you invest in product features that amplified your K factor by just nudging more users to share with more people over time?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the early days, we knew that people were talking about the product, and this is one of those products that people do talk about. It's almost uh, like people earn their own social capital by sharing the next great thing with their friends, right? So we knew that this was happening. The challenge is this is hard to measure. Although we knew it was happening, we knew that for sure. For every download and subscriber we get, that comes with additional downloads and subscribers. How we continue to try to build on this, we have tried. It is challenging. Now, word of mouth is something that people do naturally, and so I think that's always a great thing, and that has been a big part of our growth. We have encouraged by helping people gift the subscription to each other. We've had people gift a certain extended trial to each other. Different ways to foster people talking about Fitbod, like on the margins that may continue to foster this. Obviously, sharing to social media, Instagram, people do that a ton. People screenshot our product a ton. People share it through messages a ton. So I think we see this happening now. I think it's almost like I hate to go back to it. It's like build a great product people want to talk about, and they'll talk about it. And the additional features I think are definitely add-ons, but I don't think that's really driving the core word of mouth that we have. It's really people just talking about it.
I mean, that's generally been my experience as well, which is the best way to drive word of mouth is often just improving retention, because the longer you retain a user, one, if they're retaining for a long time, that means they love the product, which means they're probably more likely to talk about it. But two, the longer your average customer lifetime, the more shots on goal you get in terms of people telling their friends about the product. I guess I'm also curious, with a product like yours, there's sort of a flavor of word of mouth, which is what Reforge calls the casual contact loop. And that is, I go to the gym and somebody doesn't even necessarily have to tell me about Fitbod, because as I'm going from station to station, I sort of see somebody with their Fitbod app open and I'm like, I wonder what that is. And either I ask them about it or I go just check out Fitbod in the App Store. To what extent has that been a part of your growth strategy with Fitbod?
Anecdotally, we see that a lot. We see a lot of people are sharing us in the gym. Yeah, it's like what app is that? And it's almost like addressing a problem that is very real, right? I think other people have the same problem of hey, like the bench is taken. What do I do now? So absolutely, that is very real. I'll say that we haven't yet invested a ton of resources into building social sharing features. I would say largely Fitbod is a single player product. We give value for the individual user. Now, I think there's a huge opportunity set around bringing in multiple sets of people and having multiple individuals continue to make that product experience greater. And I think that's something that we're thinking internally on our side, but we haven't yet quite gone to that yet.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And it goes back to start with the most important thing. And the most important thing is subscriber retention, because that will drive word of mouth in its own right. So, in that vein, let's talk more about the key growth metrics that Fitbod focuses on. So, what are the most important growth KPIs that you all look at as a team? And do those remain pretty consistent quarter over quarter? Or are you sort of changing each quarter, each year, which growth metrics you're more or less focused on based off of how the business evolves?
We thought a lot about KPIs over the years. Now, for the business, the KPIs are pretty set, pretty standard, right? We're talking about retention, we're talking about conversion, we're talking about acquisition, ultimately total subscribers, and the business revenue, right? We talked about ARR. So those are pretty steady over the years. Those don't change. The challenge and where it gets complicated is there's a lot of nuance when you look at the KPIs, and further, I believe KPIs for the team should be actionable. You should be able to act on a KPI as opposed to, hey, here's where we ended up, right? And so that's kind of where these things get, more nuanced and complicated. One of the leading indicators is engagement. We look at what we call current user retention rate, and we borrowed it from Duolingo. But it's really, someone who did a workout last week and came back and did a workout this week, right? How are we retaining people to continue to be engaged with our product, and how can we measure that, and how can we build solutions to drive that and A/B test optimizing for metrics like engagement? That's definitely a big one. If you break down acquisition and conversion into different pieces of the funnel, then those are of course more actionable. Now, zooming out, the challenge then becomes every piece of the funnel. If you move that metric, then that moves other metrics in the funnel, right? Um, and so that's where things get really challenging to say, hey, like, how is it that we, drive the entire business? We can focus on different pieces, but we also make sure that that's in the context of the large funnel. That's, I think, where things get complicated. And so KPIs, to answer the question, the main ones have remain consistent, but we really want to make sure that, we're looking at the ones that we can act on and the ones that are driving the business in the right direction. And that's where things get, quite a bit more complicated.
That was such a great response. I want to break down a few of the most important points I heard in there. So, one was when you zoom all the way up to the highest level in terms of what matters for the business, it's generally pretty simple, right? It's how many subscribers do we have? What is our subscriber retention rate? What is the LTV versus acquisition cost of those subscribers? What's the conversion rate? If you're a freemium business, it's trial start rate, is trial conversion rate, which gets you your overall subscriber conversion rate. Those are fairly table stakes. But you called out another very important point there, which was, especially as your team gets larger, you need there to be actionable upstream, what are often called proxy metrics that are easier to move in the short term, but that are highly correlated with those downstream conversion and retention metrics. And so that might cause you to drill down deeper into something like, okay, subscriber conversion within the first 7 days, or monthly versus annual subscriber retention rates. All right. And then you might have initiatives in a given quarter that focus very specifically on an area of the product experience that drive that specific proxy metric. We want to get our annual versus monthly subscriber mix higher. And so we're going to run experiments on the paywall that nudge users more into annual subscriptions. Or we're going to experiment with our subscription prices in order to get more people to select annual versus monthly subscription plans. And then I think the other point you called out, and this is so important and so overlooked, is that growth strategies operate like machines. I almost think of them as like, you're a car mechanic. And if you spend all your time solving for one bottleneck, so within the car analogy, let's say you're building a stronger, more powerful engine, that then has implications for other parts of the car, right? The transmission, the tires, everything needs to be upgraded in order to keep up with the more powerful engine, or else you're just shifting the bottleneck to a different part of the growth engine. And so I think those are all very important points. You have to think of it as a whole, not as a sum of individual parts. And it sounds like the way that you've done that is maintaining a consistent set of top line business KPIs, but then shifting what your specific team proxy metrics are in any given quarter to make sure you're focusing on the biggest bottlenecks in the system. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the focus of different actionable metrics are definitely things that we look at. I think the other thing to understand is that KPIs are indicators, right? These are indicators. These aren't the actual you know picture of the performance of the business or an activity that we're doing. And so yes, we want to measure things, right? Because we want to have visibility on how we're doing. But and I think Shopify talks about this Goodhart's law. The moment the and I'm paraphrasing, the moment the metric becomes the focus, it ceases to become effective, right? Because if all we're doing is optimizing on a single number, then that basically loses sight on what you're saying, what the larger engine is doing. So I think it's important to keep that in the context and look at the KPIs for how we're able to use them to benefit and drive what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. So now let's zoom out a little bit and let's talk about how, okay, you've got your overarching growth strategy and you've used frameworks like Hooked and offense versus defense to inform that. And then you've got your set of growth metrics and KPIs underlying that strategy that sort of give you a sense for what's working well and what's not. But then ultimately where the rubber hits the road is, how are you acquiring these subscribers? And so as we think about organic and paid channels, are there particular and maybe we spend a little more time talking about paid because we already talked about word of mouth earlier. What sort of paid acquisition channels have been most important for acquiring subscribers onto Fitbod, and how has that evolved over time?
So when we go back and talk about growth loops, our two big growth loops, and I'm a believer, Reforge talks about this, that every company is going to have one or two major growth loops until they get to a certain size. Our major growth loops are word of mouth and then paid ads. And paid ads, in a way, going back to the early days, such that they should pay for themselves. And essentially, like with a certain period of payback, you should be taking in more than you're putting into the paid ads engine. And that's really what it was for us going back to the early days. And it was fuel on the fire. We already had a really strong funnel. We were basically adding more acquisition to the top, and that was turning into driving more subscribers for us, and that was great. And at the earlier stage, it was almost like you mentioned your podcast with Nick from Com, where being able to analyze and have that mind towards finding the opportunity. I've used the word arbitrage with our team. Finding that arbitrage is actually what we're looking for. And in the early days, we did Apple search ads, we did Facebook ads, and being methodical about it, understanding the numbers, understanding the different steps of the funnel was all that was needed. So I want to say I was the one who did the medium buying, the account structure, things like that. Jesse, of course, is our design mind. He made the creatives for us, and the combination of that was able to get paid ads working for the first, I would say, 2, 3, 4 years. That's kind of where that was. Obviously, the landscape of paid ads has changed since 2017 is when we probably started that. And so Meta has gotten more sophisticated. We obviously have TikTok in the space as well. Apple search ads, they're definitely still there, although a lot of Apple search ads is showing up on search terms that at this point we already rank for. And then and of course there's Google, right? So and of course now there's all different directions that we can go in terms of do we want to direct them to the app? Do we want to direct them to the web? What type of experience do we want them to have? And also the account structure and creative experimentation. So now it's this whole much more complex area that we continue to double down in. We have a full team that continues to focus on this. I'm constantly learning more. We're all constantly learning more. We're sharing insights about, hey, here's the account structure. Here's how we test creatives. Here's how we experiment. Here's how we break out different campaign structures. So all of this becomes a large space of a really interesting area that I would say the team has really taken to the next level beyond what we started out with. And what we started out with is really like saying, hey, like if we're thoughtful about our creative, if we are smart about our account structure, then we should be able to bring people into the funnel that are ROI positive, which will then continue to create on itself. And that's really how we started. And I think that has continued to where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, this is oversimplifying it, but you sort of break down the art and the science of paid acquisition. And in the early days, you don't have the sophistication to get too fancy on the science. And so it really comes down to let's get some good creative. Let's make sure we know who our target customer is. Let's speak directly to that target customer. And let's just rinse and repeat until we find out what's working. As you get larger and more sophisticated, you can spread your bets across multiple channels. You can get much more dialed in terms of the math of what's working, what's not working. So let's talk a little bit more about that, because at this point you're doing close to $40 million in revenue. You've got almost 50 employees. It sounds like you've got a robust user acquisition team, whether that's in-house or using outside agencies, or probably a combination of both. So at this point, what are some of the different paid channels that you're focused on? And is it a relatively even mix of those channels, or are there like kind of one or two hero channels that drive the vast majority of the spend? And I guess my last question as part of all this is just, are there one or more metrics that you're using to help drive capital allocation decisions, things like DA ROAS or payback period, or other paid UA metrics that are most important at Fitbod?
Yep, absolutely. To answer your question, Meta is just a massive platform, and we continue to find opportunity there. And the next opportunity is to scale is probably still going to be Meta. So Meta is a big platform. Apple Search Ads is very performant, although there's a finite number of search inquiries. Uh, Google is good because Google is also intent-based search, so that's definitely a good thing. And TikTok is definitely a large platform for us to continue to explore. I think there's a different type of user on TikTok, but definitely a large platform that I think will be really, really interesting. But right now, Meta encompasses Instagram, Facebook, and all their apps. That continues to be the biggest one for us, and we continue to double down there. So that's kind of where that is.
And to the extent there's one metric to rule them all on paid acquisition, like what are you focused on to know what's working and what's not, and where you want to shift dollars around to optimize your capital allocation?
Yeah. Good question. CAC. We look at CAC. Obviously, the other pieces are important, and the other pieces like we talk about trial starts or like day 7 conversion or onboarding completions. Those all go into how we understand CAC and how we improve CAC. There's other factors that are important, things like payback. that will
Mhm.
drive, our working capital ability to continue to fund, fund our paid ads machine. So I think all these pieces are important, but ultimately it comes down to CAC, and CAC, of course, knowing what LTV is, right? So LTV to CAC, that's the entire ROI formula. So that's something that we kind of look to collectively, and then ultimately, then the other variable is budget, right? Because then we have a strong LTV to CAC. Then the question is, okay, what is the amount of addressable market that we could bring in, at that level of CAC? So that's basically how we look at it. I think again, they all interact and affect each other. All the metrics affect each other. However, if we kind of want to isolate down to, hey, like this is what we're looking at, it's really looking at what budget looks like, making sure that we're in a CAC that we're comfortable with, and then having that LTV to CAC formula be able to drive a creative formula that we have.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you say CAC, I assume you mean subscriber CAC. And then you're comparing that against the LTV of a subscriber, which gives you your LTV over CAC ratio. Typically, you want at least 3x LTV over CAC. And then obviously, the further you get above that, the more room you have to just pour more fuel on the fire. That makes a ton of sense and highly consistent with what I've heard from most other consumer subscription apps that are sophisticated in paid acquisition. So let's shift gears and talk a little bit more about the last topic for today, which is AI. So you all were one of the early movers in using AI, or I guess pre-AI, sort of machine learning, or call it whatever you want, to personalize workout plans. But as more and more fitness apps incorporate AI, and we talked about Ladder earlier, how does Fitbod plan to maintain its edge and sort of stay ahead of the competition?
Fitbod was one of the first apps that made these type of workout recommendations, right? So you can call it the AI workout app. Now, when we first started, the algorithms behind the workout recommendations, it was more of an optimization problem, right? We were trying to figure out the how to rate the exercises such that the right exercises showed up, and then how to appropriately make the recommendations. We had different machine learning algorithms. We had random forest models that we used as well, but largely it was an optimization problem. And that solution that it provided, going back to what we talked about earlier, was the perfect solution for me. Uh, I was able to make the perfect workout for me. Like for me, I look at the workout. I'm like, okay, this is great. This is exactly what I want. The great thing, kind of like we said before, is that when others saw this was also a great workout for them, and it had that delight factor. They're like, wow, this is great. So it turns out there's a lot of people that this is a great solution for. As we continue to grow our user base, and the user base got more diverse, then they start to see like, hey, like all these different users had different profiles, different dynamics, different preferences, different equipment that they have access to, different goals, and all these little different nuances that they wanted that the algo didn't accommodate,
Mm.
right? So, someone, wanted to, do strength training, and they only have a set of kettlebells, and, they have 15 minutes a day. That's a very different workout than, let's say, the workout I was doing, right? And so in order to accommodate this, what we did is we had to write, rules into the algorithm, right? We had to say, hey, how
Hmm.
do we accommodate this? And this is how we can start that workout. And so at the very start, yes, we were an algorithm recommendation. Yes, in the previous world, machine learning and AI, that's what that was. But AI has gotten much, much more sophisticated to where we are today. And so what we have done since then, after many years of, you know, iterating the algorithm to accommodate different users' needs, what you can see how there's an infinite number of ways in which people work out. There's so many different ways, there's so many nuances, there's so many differences in how they work out. Some people like supersetting barbells with dumbbells. Some people explicitly don't want that, right? So
Hmm.
there's so many nuances in the ways different people work out. And what's great is now we have, these foundational models and LLMs, right?
Yep.
So they came in right at the perfect time, and our team, to our team's credit, our data science team, were able to jump on it and say, hey, this is exactly what this can accommodate, right?
Hmm.
So in other words, for a few years now, we've been running on a LLM based model that we trained ourselves. We put together ourselves on our data, 100 million workouts that we have, to be able to predict the best workout for anybody, given their profile, given their equipment, their preferences, their pattern of workouts, how they like the workouts, any adjustments that they made. So we're able to say, hey, like this is who you are. This is how you
Hmm.
line up with the millions of people in a database and 100 million workouts that we have. This is how we predict the next best workout for you. And so that type of personalization is something that we are now doing, that we tried to do before, but now we can do it at just much better, greater, and more like more awesome scale that leads to a better experience for more and more people. So that's something that we have currently. We combine that with our own proprietary and custom neural network to be able to say, hey,
Hmm.
like this is how much you should be lifted for a given exercise, right? And we are able to take that, plug into our our data set and say, hey, like you just did X amount for this one exercise, barbell incline bench press. You're not doing something else. You're doing like flat dumbbell bench press. We can probably give you exactly what you need to do for that, right? Because we have all the data to be able to infer all of that. So all of this is now like, a much more sophisticated set of AI models that we have put together internally that is trained on our 100 million workouts that we have with the data set of, the nuanced strength training data, workout sets, reps, weight. We compare it against what we recommended, so we know your preferences relative to where we are, and we're able to do that type of verifiable rewards to say, hey, this is what we think you should do next. And
Yeah.
so I know you asked about like AI and fitness, and I gave you what we do with AI and fitness, but I just think that AI is allowing us to be so much more powerful in the way we personalize workouts to individuals that it is awesome to see, and it's a great thing. And obviously we have the data set to do so, but I think combine that with the work that the team is doing, and I think it's pretty great.
Yeah. I mean, the word I've been using for that is hyper personalization. And what I hear you saying is, okay, even though Fitbod was one of the first movers in AI powered workout personalization, the tools that you had at your disposal when you first got started 10 years ago in 2015 were much more limited. And so it was maybe like, all right, we've got a workout for somebody who's at the gym and a workout for somebody who's at home, or we've got a workout for somebody who's a beginner versus somebody who's advanced, but it was much more limited and rules based. Whereas now with LLMs, you can hyper personalize down to much more granular levels of what somebody wants out of a product like Fitbod. And you now have 100 million workouts you can use to train the data set, which goes back to why your first mover advantage in this category is going to continue to yield benefits for years to come. I want to get to our lightning round quickly, but
Just to kind of, I think there's also an aspect of developing AI that includes domain knowledge, and and a lot of like how AI gets developed generally is like you want to have pretty strong controls on what you think the AI is going to do,
yep.
and you want to be able to inform the AI, hey, I think you should be doing A, B, and C, and then gradually you want to reduce the supervision that you're applying to the AI such that it's doing it's doing a lot of it on its own until ultimately you're able to let it run. And so I do think that like it's not only that AI is allowing us to be more powerful, but I think it's like the 10 years of iterating, domain knowledge, understanding, and being able to make that right recommendation to say, hey, this person wants barbells supersetted with dumbbells to make that recommendation. I think that is all grounded in what we're going to provide. So I think it's a unique and pretty fun place for me to be in, just to be able to
Mm-hmm.
see this all come together.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, the last wave of consumer tech winners were often built on network effects tied to humans, right? So, like, you have a two-sided marketplace or you have a social network. The more humans using your product, the more powerful that product is for the next marginal user. And that creates this compounding flywheel. With AI products, I think there's this new concept of a data network effect, where the more people use the product, the more data you have, the better the AI algorithm becomes, the better the AI algorithm becomes, the more people want to come use the product, and it feeds on itself. And so let's just briefly round out with one more question, and then we'll get to our lightning round, which is beyond hyper-personalization, which we just talked about. What are some of the other big opportunities for AI in the fitness category, and what sort of benefits do you think those will unlock for human health?
Yeah, I think you just talked about it. I think there's a whole ton of stuff in AI around, driving this flywheel and hyper personalization. Now, I think there's, different areas where we look out and we're like, hey, like AI has gotten so good at certain things that that we can leverage that, right? And to maybe narrow it down to a few things that we're thinking, um, the tech is great at text and communication, right? So if we think about like audio, that's a very great opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
If we think about like video, that's a great opportunity. If we got image recognition, all of this is great opportunities where we can say, hey, like the technology has gotten to a place now where we can actually layer that into our product and create a much better experience with, let's say, audio cues, let's say, video tracking and form correction. Right.
Mm.
Snap a picture of your gym and we're able to infer all of you coming at the gym, right? So so much great things that I think weren't there before that I think AI is there now that are going to be pretty awesome to incorporate. Um, there's a second category, and I think you're seeing this a lot, which is chat with LLMs, right? Being able to talk to the foundational models, and the foundational models will kind of respond to you. Obviously, I think this is maybe a little bit overused in some areas. Everyone thinks that they can put in a chat bot and now that'll be the solution. I think for us, it starts with solving the user needs and being able to figure out, okay, how best to leverage the LLMs for those user needs. And so the example here is like, if you have like an injury, right, you can chat with an LLM to actually get information about what to do, and then of course we can then adjust the workout accordingly, because based on what the LLM gives back. Obviously, talking to an AI coach is something that makes a ton of sense. And then, again, being able to adjust the workouts or adjust how our models construct the workouts based on what you're communicating. I think those are definitely really interesting. And then finally, it's just more pieces of data, right?
Mhm.
There's so much data out there. I think there's a lot of great stuff out there in terms of health wellness that if we incorporate that into our algorithms, I think they just get much more powerful. So there's a ton of stuff around AI that I think are coming. It's great to be in this space where we get to look at all the different great things that are coming out, and be able to incorporate that. And I think they're definitely going to be great for human health and wellness and longevity, to be able to know exactly what you need to do for your health.
Yeah, I love that. And again, oversimplifying it, but when we talk about AI on this podcast, oftentimes you get the generic set of answers around personalization or just marginally improving the quality of the LLM's memory or its responses. But then you also have these category specific applications. And I loved a couple of the ones you called out there. I mean, as somebody who goes to the gym often myself, it's like, okay, oftentimes I'm getting recommended exercises that I can't actually do because my gym doesn't have the right equipment. Well, if I can snap a photo of my gym and it just modifies the workout based on the equipment that is at that gym, that's great. Or the other one is form correction. I mean, that's huge in strength training because injuries happen all the time simply because people don't know the right way to be doing doing a squat or a barbell lift or whatever the exercise might be. And so if you can upload a video of yourself doing an exercise and get pointers on how to do it the proper way, both to improve performance but also to avoid injury, I think that's a huge benefit. So let's get to our lightning round. I'm going to ask a series of rapid fire questions, and you just give me very quick responses. The first one I always like to ask is just, what is the best part about working at Fitbod, and what's one thing that you would change, or as the founder are actively working to change?
Yeah, for the first part, it's really just people telling us how Fitbod has changed our lives. It's been pretty awesome to see, and we get it all the time, and it's just keeps me going, keeps us going. I'll stick to one example that I've had for years, but someone was telling me how, or someone's giving us feedback on how they had joined a gym, they paid for a gym, they stayed in their car and they're crying because they're too afraid to go to the gym. And so while they were in the car, they downloaded Fitbod. Fitbod told them what to do, gave them the confidence, were able to go to the gym, and that's really how they started the fitness journey. And so stories of this are just incredible and awesome, and keep us going. And it's pretty amazing that building a strength training app has resulted in being able to impact these people's lives. Just this morning, I was looking at feedback in our we have a Fitbod community on Facebook, and someone was saying how she has a blind husband, and I'm paraphrasing, but the blind husband texted her a message this morning and said, "Hey, you're so firm and stout, and I'm so proud of you." And so it's just like, people are seeing this, people are recognizing this, we're having an impact on people. And to me, that's just incredible. And this is a stretch. But I was thinking recently, not only like the anecdotal and qualitative feedback that we're getting, but if you think about the science that people are doing around strength and how strength drives longevity, I'm sure
Mm,
there's some calculation on like, if you do X number of workouts, this is, X percent long. And so we should be able to quantify 100 million workouts into how much, human life we've added to the world, which
yeah,
is just fun to see, right? So, and it's just like a
that's
vanity metric,
amazing.
but like I think all of this is just incredible to be able to be working in this space.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that first story in particular, I mean, so often with things like fitness, it's just about taking the first step. And so the image of somebody upset in their car because they can't bring themselves to walk into the gym, but you give them a little bit of extra confidence to get over the hump is huge. I'm going to keep going here. So besides Fitbod, what's another consumer subscription app you love and why?
I have a pretty boring life. I have two little kids. One's almost two, and one's 3.5, and so I think they consume a lot of my life. But for this, I'll maybe stay on theme and go in the kind of the health and fitness direction. I
Hmm.
I'm doing the wearables, getting really interested in my numbers. I have an Aura. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, I got
Same
mine
thing
here.
with, yeah, right here. Same thing with, smart scales and body composition. I have a Withings, so I'm able to measure my body composition, able to see,
Hmm.
all my workouts, it impacts my body composition. And then also, exploring, these blood tests and, biometrics, and also, these body scans, right? The MRI scans. So all of this, I think are definitely really interesting to me, and, are stuff that I think, are going to be a big part of not only my life, but also many others' lives.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most exciting spaces in consumer tech right now. And we had Max, who's one of the co-founders of Superpower, on the podcast, and the stuff he was talking about as far as how the health industry is going to change over the next 5 years is pretty incredible. So I couldn't agree more. What's your personal workout routine, and how has it changed since you started Fitbod?
Yeah, I do Fitbod. Um, I have my profiles in my app and I do the workout. So I've done Fitbod for the last 10 years. And before that, like I said, I've gone through different types of working out with sports, with CrossFit, I did some Olympic lifting. Um, the biggest way it's changed is that as my life has changed, I've had access to different gyms. And through the various gyms, I just plug it into Fitbod and my workout routine continues. So I had a full gym at the start, was doing a lot of different workouts. Then COVID hit and I was at home and I bought a set of adjustable dumbbells. I had a bench and I was getting a great workout for years, just 90-pound adjustable dumbbells and a flat bench, right? So that was great. Um, but what was exciting for me more recently is getting back to a gym and
Hmm.
specifically having a barbell. And now I do a lot of barbell workouts through Fitbod, and those are great. And my strength is doing great. And then right now, actually, the great thing here is like I'll go to different places. I'll have multiple profiles, multiple gyms. I'll go to like an apartment gym or a hotel gym, and I'll go to just swap profiles and
Hmm.
continue my workout routine. Having access to different gyms. So that's kind of that's been my routine. It's just Fitbod, and like I said, now that I'm able to track, my VO2 max, my body fat percentage, it's working. I'm in the top category of all those. Just continue to do Fitbod. So pretty
Nice.
cool to see.
Well, you come full circle. The fruits of building for your own need, and the app has generated $150 million in cumulative revenue since you started. But you've got the perfect workout now, and you can't put a price on that. Two more here. What's one health benefit of strength training that most people don't know about?
I think strength is now a known thing. Maybe it's more world, but I think a lot of people know that there's a massive benefit in strength, and there's a big surge in this area. If you look at the big box gyms, they are putting in more strength equipment and removing cardio equipment because that's what people want. And
Hmm.
if you look at various demographics, whether it's old, young, male, female, everyone is getting more and more into strength. So um, I'm not sure it's something that people don't know about yet. Um, but I think it's definitely a big thing. And I think it continues to grow. And I think that's almost the correct thing, right? Peter Attia, he wrote the book on longevity, and he talks about the
Hmm.
pillars of health, strength, cardio, nutrition, sleep. And this is my words. But he has said that the single biggest factor in health and longevity is strength. And
Mm.
so obviously all these are important. All of them are important to come together. But the fact that we have been driving strength and it's, now such a big aspect, I think is all coming together.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think you're right that strength training as a key to longevity has been overlooked for a long time. And I'm somebody who, I grew up running track and cross country. I was a soccer player, so I run all the time. But I've only really gotten into strength training more seriously in the last couple of years. And I remember going to my doctor. I turned 40 earlier this year. Go to my doctor and asking him what's like the number one thing I could do over the next 10 to 20 years to just live a healthier life in older age. And he said strength training, because beyond a certain age, it's really hard to maintain muscle mass, and so you got to sort of be proactive about it. But as long as you're proactive about it, it can have a huge impact on your health later in life. Last question here. What is the most underrated feature of Fitbod that you think more people should use?
Fitbot is very simple at the surface. Simple is relative, but at the surface layer, it's simple, easy to use, easy to get into. But as you then dive into certain screens of the app, certain areas, certain functionality, you see that there's a depth of functionality that exists underneath it. Um, and so, for example, I already talked about the multiple gym profiles. You can go into the app, you can have three different gym profiles, you can have body weight at home, you can have a full gym, something else. And wherever you work out, you get a great workout there, and it follows through with your routine very nicely. So multiple gym profiles. One of the best things about Fitbod is that we've seen with our users is replacing, adding, removing, making any adjustments to the workout that then feeds the algorithm, right? So the algorithm knows, hey, you're removing this, it's responsible for one of many reasons, but you're removing this. So it knows to actually incorporate that for future recommendations. We're able to increase and decrease variability. So if you like to stay very consistent, we can give you a consistent workout. But if you otherwise want to try a bunch of new exercises, we can do that for you too. And that's something that you tell us. We have play calculators. We have like videos and instructions that we film ourselves and put together ourselves. And then one final one, the estimated 1 rep max for every single exercise that I'm able to go in and say, hey, like this is the progress I'm making. There's the chart of where I'm going. Here's how I'm getting stronger over time. Is something that I pay attention to with every single workout. So they're definitely critical.
I mean, this is one of the cornerstones or the hallmarks of a great consumer app is if you're a beginner and you just want to use the simple version of the product, you can, and it's quick and easy to learn. But then for power users, there's this whole wealth of additional features underneath the hood that you can dig into. And, I'm somebody who uses Fitbod along with Ladder on a regular basis. And half the features you described, I didn't even know were in the app. So I'm going to have to go give it another try. Well, this has been a pleasure, Alan, as I knew it would be. Any last words to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
No, this is fine. And glad to be on this podcast. We got a ton of work to do, and I think we'll get to work. Obviously, if people have thoughts or want to reach out or have feedback for me, let me know. We listen to all the feedback. But I know that this is fun.
Awesome. Well, good luck with all the work, and excited to see the product continue to evolve. Thanks, Alan.
Sounds great. Thank you.